We're going to start from the medium-sized line, the first medium-sized line. It's about halfway down the page. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. This Gemara, it's based on the Mishnah. The Mishnah actually 3 words before, Beis Shammai oimer mechabdin v'chulu. Beis Shammai says we are mechabed. Mechabed means to sweep. We sweep the room, which means either the floor or the table, where we sweep it up, and afterwards we wash mayim achronim, the water before you bench, the water that we wash our fingertips. That is done afterwards. First, you got to sweep, according to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says that you wash your hands, and afterwards you sweep up. So the Gemara brings a brisa, Tosefta, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. Beis Shammai says, Mechabdin es habayis, we sweep the room, and afterwards we wash our hands, which means our fingers, the mayim achronim, fingertips. And the reason is, this Tosefta gives the reason. The reason is, because if you're going to say that you should wash your fingertips first, your hands first, it's going to end up that the liquid from the droplets that fall from your fingertips are going to fall on the food, and they will make the food disgusting, and no one's going to want to eat that food, and therefore you should wash your hands after you sweep up. So mayim achronim should be done after the food is cleaned up. Now Rashi and the Mishnah told us that this refers to if they sit on the floor, they have to sweep up the floor. If they sit at a table, so they should clean off the table. However, from the Shulchan Aruch and from other commentaries, it seems that it shouldn't only be if you sit at a table, you only sweep up the table, you only clean up the table. It seems that the issue is, at least in those days, was that we were concerned that they're going to move away the table after they finish eating, and even the stuff that fell on the floor is going to get ruined, which sounds like they used to eat stuff that would fall on the floor, and probably they cleaned up before they started the meal. So if anything fell on the floor, they would probably eat it. And I'm assuming that they didn't have dirt floors. If there was dirt floors, I don't know if they would eat it, but maybe they had wood floor. I don't know what type of flooring they had. Sand, maybe sand isn't as dirty, but whatever it is, however they things that would fall, they would eat. And if you're going to wash mayim achronim, it's gonna spill onto those foods that had fallen during the meal, and therefore Beis Shammai says no, you got to first sweep up, and then you could wash the mayim achronim. Now the brisa interestingly then repeats it. Avon netilas yodayim, but washing the hands, Beis Shammai techila lo yspiralu. Beis Shammai says, do not wash your hands first. My taima, why not? Mishum pirurim, because things might have fallen. Now, if you think about the flow of the brisa, it's a little surprising. Let me tell you it in English. The brisa here says, Beis Shammai says, you have to sweep up the house and afterwards wash your hands. Mayim achronim. Because if you're going to say to wash mayim achronim first, and it's going to end up that you're going to ruin the foods. You're going to ruin the foods, which means the foods that fell, you're going to ruin them. But you should wash your hands first. But washing your hands first, you shouldn't do. And the reason why not, because of things that might have fallen. So he says it once, that you should first sweep and then wash your hands, because if you're going to wash your hands first, it's going to ruin the food. And then he says, but washing your hands first, you shouldn't do. Because why not? Because things that have fallen. So one way of learning the Gemara is the Bach, that he says, you know what, that extra line must be a mistake, And when they would print the Gemaras, when they would write it down, it must have been like a repetition or something, or two different versions that got mixed together. And the Bach says just erase that other line. However, there are those that want to say, no, you could keep the line in the Gemara, even though it's repetitious, because it's telling you that Beis Shammai holds you have to do it this way. It says it twice, meaning don't do it the other way because of this problem. And if you're not going to listen, then you're going to get into it. You're going to get yourself into trouble. You have to do it this way. It says it twice, showing li'ikuva, so to speak. It's showing that it's not acceptable even after the fact if you did it the other way. In other words, you really have to do it this way. It's not like it's better. This is the way it should be done. Now, Beis Hillel, what does Beis Hillel say? Beis Hillel loimrim im shamish Talmud Chacham. Beis Hillel says if the shamish is a Talmud Chacham, noitel peirurin sheyesh ben kazayis, minich perurin shein ben kazayis. If the shamish is knowledgeable, and what that means is he knows about the prohibition of ruining food and so on, and he knows about the difference between. So what he should do is should remove the food that's going to be eaten, like a kazayas size food, which is prohibited to ruin, and he leaves the food that doesn't have a kazayas, the food that's not the size of an olive, because that food is even if the stuff falls on it, it's not a problem. It's not an isser of ibad eichlin. It doesn't have so much significance. It's not so valuable, and therefore, you only remove the big pieces, and you don't have to remove the small pieces. And you don't have to sweep up. You just remove the big pieces, according to Beis Hillel, and that's fine. Now, the simple understanding here is that Beis Shammai says you have to do it his way. Beis Hillel, what do they hold? Do you have to do it this way? Probably not. If you want, you could sweep up first and sweep everything, sweep up the small pieces, the big pieces, whatever you want, clean up. If you don't want, you don't have to, right? You could do it the way Beis Hillel says if you want, which is you take the big pieces and leave the small pieces, and then afterwards you could sweep up. Don't sweep up. You just take off the good challah that's on the table, or the good dessert, that's whatever's on the table now. Clean it up, whatever fell. Clean up whatever you're gonna, any big pieces, and goodbye. You're fine. You don't have to sweep up. So that would be one way of learning. So again, according to that, it fits. Beis Shammai says you have to do it his way. Beis Hillel is saying it doesn't matter. You do it this way, you do it that way. It doesn't matter. You want to follow Beis Shammai, you can. You don't want to follow Beis Shammai, you don't have to. But we will see that there is another way of learning Beis Hillel, and that Beis Hillel says you have to do it my way. But we'll soon see.
But excuse me.
Yeah.
But I thought that Hillel said that because they consider the shamash a learned person.
Okay, but what happens if you want to sweep up first? Is there a problem?
If the guy doesn't know that he has to pick up the big pieces,
yeah, he wants to pick up all the pieces, the small pieces, the big pieces. He's going to do his cleanup now. He wants to do like Beis Shammai said. Is there a problem according to Beis Hillel to do it that way? Beis Hillel says you don't have to, right? That would be simple how you learn. Beis Hillel says I'm not worried about this whole thing. He's a Talmud Chacham. He'll pick up the big. He'll leave the small pieces because he knows to pick up the big pieces. So you don't have to sweep up, but you have to. Is Beis Hillel saying you have to follow my way, or he's saying if you want, the shamish is Talmud Chacham. It's okay. You don't have to, why sweep up? Right? That's what it seems like. Ben?
Okay. Yes. Well, that's what it says, but I thought they based it on knowing that the shamash is going to be a learned person.
Yeah, but let's say he is learning. Does he
Yeah,
have to
if he's
do it?
learned, it's good. If he's not learned, it's a problem.
Okay, but let's say he's learned, okay? And he
Yeah.
says, I'm not bending down twice to do this whole thing. I want to sweep up now all once. Can I do it?
Well, then he's doing the wrong thing.
He's doing the wrong thing?
Yeah, because he's spoiling food. And he knows he's not supposed to if he's learned.
No, he's not spoiling food. He's actually even saving the food that has the little crumbs he's saving.
Or he's
not
picking up
spoiling any
everything.
food. He's sweeping up before you do my machreinim. So it's not a problem according to Beis Hillel, it would seem, right? So that would be the simple understanding of the argument. Again, we didn't. Now the Gemara is going to tell us exactly what the argument is, but the concept sounds okay. That Beis Hillel doesn't really care either way, and he just gives you this alternative option. Now the Gemara says that Messiah Ale Rabbi Yochanan. This is a proof to Rabbi Yochanan. Damar Rabbi Yochanan Peruim Shein Ben Chazayis. Rabbi Yochanan says that pieces that don't have the size of an olive, mutar la'abdan miyad, you are allowed to. Let me just the pieces that don't have the size of an olive, you are allowed to ruin them, and in other words, cause the mayim achronim to drip on them. Now, that seems to fit with this because what's going to happen according to Beis Hillel? According to Beis Hillel, what's going to happen is the mayim achronim might drip on the small pieces. So you see, it fits with Rabbi Yochanan's statement that you don't have to worry, even though it's food, but it's less than the size of a kazayas, you're allowed to cause them to be ruined and inedible. Okay, the might come if we so the Gemara says, so what is the real argument here? Well, why? Beis Hillel says if you have a shamash and Talmud Chacham, then you can pick up the big pieces. But what does Beis Shammai say if you have a shamash Talmud Chacham, right? He according to like Beis Shammai is what is the logic behind the argument of it? So the Gemara explains. Beis Hillel says, also shamash b'shamash am haaretz. You're not allowed to use an am haaretz that doesn't know the laws of with regard to cleaning up and his the halachas that are applicable to him. You can't use such a amara, such a shamash. You can't use such a helper. Beis Shammai says mutar l'shamash b'shamash amaretz. You're allowed to use anyone. You're allowed to use a amaretz who's not familiar with all the halachas. It's fine. You have to be so careful about who you use. So this is the machlokes. So what does that mean? That Beis Hillel says that you have to use someone who's knowledgeable. Beis Shammai says, no, it doesn't matter. You're going to Beis Shammai, what's the way to do my machreinim? First sweep up, and then you do the my machreinim after you sweep up. No problem. Because your shamash doesn't know the difference between big pieces, small pieces, right? He doesn't know that what you're concerned about. He doesn't know you have to be careful about the ruining food and so on. He's not familiar with these laws, and therefore Beis Shammai says no, you're using anyone. Therefore, sweep up first. Beis Hillel says no. Beis Hillel says you guys are Talmud Chacham, so it doesn't matter. You're allowed to pick up the big pieces. He's allowed to do what he knows, which is pick up the big pieces, which fits the halacha. And the small pieces will get ruined, no problem. You don't have to sweep. You can just pick up the big pieces, remove remove what's important, and the other pieces that are insignificant, you don't have to worry about. So the Gemara then says who the halacha follows. Yes, Mordechai.
So for these purposes, having a Talmud Chacham sweep the floor, it would not be considered menial for him because there's that in about when it comes to the samim that you can smear it on the waiter's head, but if the waiter's a Talmud Chacham, you don't do it to him because it's disrespectful for him.
Yeah.
Right, that is an interesting connection because the Gemara here is not exactly referring to the same type of Talmud Chacham. Over there, it's the issue was he's going to the marketplace with a cologne. You know what I mean? He's now going to smell everywhere he goes. So it's going to have. It's not appropriate. That's a scholar is not appropriate. But here we're not dealing necessarily with because here what your question really boils down to is how are you allowed to use a Talmud Chacham to be your janitor? That's really the question that's bothering you behind if you dig a little deeper and remove the surface. That's really what's the question over here, and that's what's bothering you, Mordechai. A good question, and the commentaries do ask this: how could you be allowed to use a scholar to be your janitor? And the answer, the simple understanding is that we're not dealing with a major scholar. We're dealing with someone who just happens to know these laws. So according to that, it's not really a question. You're not hiring the chief rabbi to be your janitor here. What you're doing is you happen to have someone who just he read through the rules instead of being illiterate. He happens to be literate, and he was able to read through the rules that applicable to him for the how in the Jewish house you have to clean up what you're not allowed to ruin, what's milchik, what's fleshik. He just saw more or less what's the rules. He's no major scholar, so that would seem to be the understanding here. So the bottom line is that we have this argument Bishama Beisel. Amar Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina, Amar Rav Huna. So Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina says the name Rav Huna, Kulu Pirkin, Halacha Beis Hillel. In the whole parak, the halacha follows Beis Hillel, Bar Meha, except here, the halacha Beis Shammai. Here, the halacha follows Beis Shammai. That number one is, what does that mean? That you're allowed to use anyone for your shamish. You don't have to hire a shamish who's knowledgeable. You could use anyone who is going to be your shamish. And according to that, what should you do for mayim achreinim? You should really sweep up before you wash mayim achreinim. Now, Rabbi Ishaya Masni Ibcha. Rabbi Ishaya says he learns the opposite. That it's not Beis Shammai, it's Beis Hillel who says that. So, Uvahanami halacha to Beis Hillel. Here also, the halacha follows Beis Hillel, just like all the other cases. So what comes out is that the halacha follows Beis Hillel in all the other cases. And here, the halacha follows whoever it is that says you have to sweep up first and then do mayim achreinim. That's who the halacha follows. If you learn that it's Beis Shammai, then the halacha follows Beis Shammai. If you learn that Beis Hillel is the one who says that, the halacha follows Beis Hillel. But the point is, you need to wash your hands after you sweep up, so that the liquid doesn't fall. The droplets from your hand don't fall on the food and ruin it. So that's the Gemara. Now the one of the commentaries says that according to Beis Hillel, you need to wash your hands first before you sweep up. You need to do it that way. Why would Beis Hillel say that? Because what Beis Hillel is saying is that you're not allowed to use a shamish who's a Talmud Chacham. You're not allowed to use a shamish who's an Am Haaretz. You're not allowed to use a shamish who's an Am Haaretz. And because of that, Beis Shammai wants to make sure that you don't transgress that. And because he wants to make sure you don't transgress that, he says you have to, you're not allowed to sweep up first. You have to first wash mayim achreinim. And because of that, he holds that that this is the way it must be done. Now, of course, the Gemara says we don't follow Beis Hillel, but we don't follow this opinion. But that's how Beis Hillel learned, and that's how this, according to this, that's how you would learn Beis Hillel's statement that you're not allowed to do it the Beis Shammai way. You have to do it. You have to do it this way. Now, this would explain why the Bach removes that extra line earlier, because the extra line was emphasizing that Beis Shammai is very stubborn he's very confident on his view, and you have to do it that way, implying like Beis Hillel isn't. Now, if you remove that line, it means they're both the same. Beis Shammai says, do it my way. Beis Hillel says, no, you got to do it my way. So they're both equal. So that would fit with this girsa where you remove that extra line, which I guess makes sense because there probably were different Gemaras, and maybe two of them had this. I'm guessing that maybe one Gemara had it this way, one Gemara had it that way. When they did the printing, they probably put the two together. And the Bach says, no, it's redundant, just remove it. And the point is, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are both in the same, they're both, claiming the same level of importance to their claim. Now, Beis Shammai says you have to do it this way. Beis Hillel says, no, you have to do it that way. And he specifically wants to teach everyone that you need to have a shamish, a Talmud Chacham. And what he wants to say is, I'm not making a plan for you if you're using an Am Haaretz. If you're using an Am Haaretz, I'm not giving you. We're not allowing you an avenue to make it work, because that would be Beis Shammai, and that means that you're transgressing the way you should be doing it. Now, the question on this is, and this is probably what Ezra is going to ask, why does he say the word im? Is that what your question is, Ezra? No? Okay, what's your question?
I was going to say when it said Ibcha, it's reversed. He's talking about everything that's there, including who is saying you could use a Talmid Chacham versus a Am Haaretz. And if that's
Right.
the case, then it logically follows from the way I understand it.
Yeah. No, the argument is the source of the argument is: are you allowed to use an Am Haaretz as a shamish? That's the source of the argument. The question is, who holds? Is it Beis Shammai who says that, or Beis Hillel who says that? And that develops into the question of: do you have to wash mayim achreinim first, or do you sweep the house first? Right?
Well, I always thought that Bet Hillel tends to be a little bit less constrictive, and so therefore he would say you can use an Am Haaretz, whereas Beit Shammai, who happens to be more constrictive, would be the one to say, if you're going to do this, then you need to use someone who understands the laws.
Right.
And
So
that's why when the man said it's reversed, it means everything that we've been discussing turns out to be reversed, including who says you can use an Am Haaretz as a shamash versus who says you can use a Talmid Chacham as a shamash.
right. So what you're saying, that it's referring to both points, that you're correct about. That, in other words, the entire discussion here is reversed. That is correct. However, what you're saying, but you're asking a question of how could Beis Hillel is supposed to be so he comes from the level of chesed, of kindness. Beis Shammai is considered gvura. So why would Beis Hillel be the one who would say that it's usur, it's prohibited to use a shamish that's a Am Haaretz? And Beis Shammai, who's supposed to be more strict, he's the one who's allowing a shamish that's an Am Haaretz. So that's an interesting question. That it's brought down in Sfarim that Beis Shammai is more. You see from all the arguments that Beis Shammai is more strict, Beis Hillel is always more lenient, and it's brought in Hasidic Sfarim that it's because Beis Shammai's soul is from the level that has an element of Gevura, and Beis Hillel's soul is from the element of Chesed. It's connected more to Chesed. So why is it that they would argue the opposite way with regard to an Am Haaretz? And maybe that's why Rabbi Shaya wants to learn that it's not this way, that you have to switch it. But what would be the other way of understanding it? So I think the understanding would be that using an Am Haaretz, it seems to be more lenient, but in the end, you mess more things up. In other words, is this going to, is there going to be issues in the future from it? And Beis Hillel, interestingly enough, similar to Hanukkah, what is Beis Hillel? He's always looking about he's looking forward. Actually, I'm not sure if that's correct. He's looking forward. No, maybe Beis Shammai is more looking forward. But it would seem that maybe, that could be a reason why he's more concerned over here, is because he's actually being strict up front, but in the long term, it's actually causing there to be that he's going to be more lenient, because you're not going to end up transgressing the issue. In other words, he might sound more strict. It's like the bark is worse than the bite. He has a big bark, but he doesn't have. But in other words, here he's just telling you don't do it. But it's basically what he's doing is saving you, more concerned about your food not getting ruined. You know what I mean? So maybe that's what his leniency is. So it's just a thought that comes to mind. But it's an interesting question. But the other question is, why would Beis Hillel say if the shamash is a Talmud Chacham, then he takes the pieces that are large and he puts them aside, and the pieces that are small he leaves? What does that mean? If he's a Talmud Chacham, I thought Beis Hillel said you have to be a Talmud, right? I thought Beis Hillel holds you have to be a Talmud Chacham. So why is he saying if? So there is another girsa here. And the other girsa has a little different wording here, which would not say if he's a Talmud Chacham, meaning he's automatically a Talmud Chacham. And according to that, it wouldn't be a problem. So there is another girsa, another text of how it reads. But the simple reading is, if he's a Talmud Chacham, he takes takes the big pieces and he leaves the small pieces. Maybe you could answer that he's telling Beis Shammai, you hold that you can use an Amoretz, but let me just tell you, you won't have any of your problem if the shamash is a Talmud Chacham. If he's a Talmud Chacham, then there's no issue. So I don't have this issue at all. So it could be that he's saying that he's telling Beis Shammai that if the shamash would be a Talmud Chacham, then what's the big deal? It just takes the big pieces. It's only an issue according to you. Yes, Ben.
So the if is really just in case. It's just weighing it against the idea that maybe somebody is not a Talmud Chacham.
Yeah, but the problem is that Beis Hillel does hold that you can't use someone who's not a Talmud Chacham. So what's the if? If he's a Talmud Chacham.
Maybe you didn't use him on purpose that he's not a Talmud Chacham. If it happened that he's not, then
so, but he doesn't say if he's not. He says if he is a Talmud Chacham. Sounds like more times he's not.
All right. So let's say the other way.
Right.
They are weighing the possibility if he is a Talmud Chacham.
No, but according to what you're saying, it should be the opposite. You're supposed to use a Talmud Chacham. If you by mistake he's not a Talmud Chacham, then tell me what to do.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is it says if he's a Talmud Chacham. That's according to Beis Hillel. It doesn't make sense, right?
Well, he's still weighing the possibility of another case.
So the way the commentary explains is what he says is Beis Hillel, well, similar to what we just said. If the shamash is a Talmud Chacham, then you don't need to sweep. There's no need to sweep because because he takes the big pieces. So he's not saying that you're allowed to use a different Talmud Chacham. He's saying if he would be a Talmud Chacham, then there's no need for this whole thing. So I have no problem. I guess that's along the same lines as what we just said. Okay, so that's the this is basically a piece of Gemara on its own. In other words, this is the beginning and end of this little piece of Gemara. I looked it up in the Shulchan Aruch, chapter 180, and in the Shulchan Aruch. So it deals with, number one, we deal with the question that Ezra had asked about, are you supposed to leave a piece of bread on your table? And so that's one issue that the commentaries are dealing with. And then there's another issue of ruining pieces of bread that are smaller than a kazayas that might cause poverty. So these are two issues that have to be dealt with regard to our Gemara. Because on the one hand, our Gemara implies, like, don't have any bread at your table. You know, Beis Shammai says sweep up, and you don't have any bread at your table. And we know that there is a Gemara, it's in Sanhedrin, there is a Gemara that mentions that you're supposed to have some bread on the table. You leave bread on the table. And we said reasons yesterday. We said some reasons for it, that it has to do with having bread on your table.
In case that a poor man comes by.
Yeah, well, there were two reasons. One was that you're thanking Hashem. It should be recognizable to everyone that you're thanking Hashem that gave food and supplies everyone with food. And that the bracha rests, like similar to the story of Elisha with the oil, that a bracha rests on something that's there. Just like this woman had a little oil, and Elisha said, pour that oil and you'll fill many jars with that oil. And so the bracha rests on something that's there, not on something that's empty. So number one, he says it should be recognizable. So you shouldn't remove the bread and the tablecloth from the table, because it should be recognizable to everyone that you're thanking Hashem for his kindness, that he prepared food for everyone. And so they see the food, and also that the bracha rests on something that's on something that's there, not on something that's empty. And if you don't, then you don't see a siman bracha. And on this it says, because you should have food for a poor person, like Ben just mentioned, and also to thank Hashem for the kindness that you even have extra. So it sounds like there's more than two reasons even. That, in other words, on the one hand, you shouldn't remove it, and if you do, you don't get a siman bracha. It's like additional reasons. Why isn't there a siman bracha? You don't see a siman bracha, and that would be because you should always have food prepared for a poor person, or to praise Hashem about the abundance that you have extra, you not just enough. And then so that seems to contradict our Gemara, which says that you would sweep up and clean the table, and before you wash my machreinim. So on that, we mentioned that the Mishnah Berurah says that you would put that piece of whatever bread is left, put it to the side of the table where you're not washing my machreinim, so you don't have an issue. So that's how we answered that question. And now I wanted to mention, to bring the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, who says that if you didn't leave bread on the table, then don't bring a whole loaf onto the table, because that is symbolic of Avodah Zarah. We mentioned that yesterday as well from the regular Shulchan Aruch. And seems to be a way of the non-Jews, a way of idol worship. Now, if it was on the table already, you have a whole loaf that's on the table already. So then you leave it until after Brochos Hamazon, but you don't bring a new whole loaf to the table to because it looks like you're setting a table for Avodah Zarah. Now, the reason why we don't do this today, and that's really the question that has to be dealt with as well, is why don't we follow this sweeping up before we wash Mayim Achronim? Because the Gemara concludes what the halacha is. It's a little unclear who the name of the halacha is. It's either Beis Hillel or Beis Shammai, but we know what the fact is. And the fact of the halacha is that you're supposed to sweep up before Mayim Achronim. So the question is, so why don't we do that nowadays? So in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he brings something interesting. He says, in the time of the Gemara, they would remove the small tables before everyone, before Mayim Achronim, and they would wash Mayim Achronim in the place where the tables were. So they needed to clean the floor where the tables were before you wash Mayim Achronim, so that there aren't any pieces that will get ruined from the Mayim Achronim. And even though you're allowed to ruin small pieces that don't have a kazayas, we're afraid maybe the shamash will be an am haaretz, because you're allowed to use an am haaretz shamash, and maybe he's going to leave on the table also pieces that have a kazayas, and when he removes the bread from the table, he might leave some of those pieces, and maybe they're going to fall when he removes. They'll fall from him when he removes them. So he might leave on the table pieces that have a kazayas when he removes the bread from the table, and afterwards they will fall when he removes, which I think it means when he removes the table, they might fall off the table, and they will get ruined by the when you wash your hands. So what it sounds like he's adding one point that we didn't mention, and that is that if the shamash might leave bread pieces on the table, they would remove the table, but those pieces might have fallen off. In other words, what they're supposed to do is remove the pieces from the table before they remove the table. But he might have left pieces on the table, and when he removes the table, they might then fall off, and they will become ruined when you wash Mayim Achronim. Now, we don't remove the table, and we wash our hands in a place where there are no pieces, so you don't have to wash your hands first. Now, the question is, it seems like nowadays that might have changed. We generally wash Mayim Achronim right on the table, so it sounds like maybe we should be extra careful not to ruin the not to get any of that Mayim Achronim onto any of the food. So it means you should remove the food from any of the men who are washing Mayim Achronim. Remove the food from anywhere near there, so that the Mayim Achronim doesn't drip. It would seem like that's what should be done in today's day and age. We saw something in the Mishnah Brewery yesterday about that. That if you're sitting in a place and they're washing their hands on the table in a vessel, even now the din is that you should clean the table from pieces of bread so they shouldn't get ruined, and from the droplets of the Mayim Achronim. Similar to what Rashi brought, that you have to clean up the table. And nevertheless, he says you should leave the bread on the edge of the table so that you're not removing the bread, like we learned earlier, that you have to have some bread when you bench. Okay, yes, Ezra.
No, I've been a guest at certain at people's houses where they have that little metal piece that comes along and they drag on the tablecloth in order to remove or catch as much of the bread and take it off, so that before they bring out the Mayim Achronim. And so I would, you're saying that the minhag nowadays we don't do that, but yet I see people who have done it.
Are you talking about the plate that's under the Mayim Achronim cup?
No.
Oh.
It's a little bar about yay wide, and they just drag it along the top of the tablecloth to catch the breadcrumbs and things like that, so they take it off the table.
It's
Uh-huh.
about,
And I've,
It's a roller that scoops up the krishkis and
well,
keeps
you
it
know,
in the box.
they have different patentum on those things. So
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You'll have to take a picture and then send it to me. I'm not
in
familiar with.
restaurants, I've seen it. Yeah, a flat piece of metal that they're holding in their hand and they're sliding the flat area on the table and collecting the pieces.
Uh-huh. The last time I was in a restaurant was in Chicago with you, Ben. So
Ah,
I don't know about these things. I didn't think they had it there.
that wasn't the one.
Uh-huh.
so I have one, but I don't know if you can see it.
Oh,
It's
well, the problem is you're on
this-
blur. If
I
you're
know.
on some background, if you don't have
Yeah,
the
so
background.
let me remove the background.
Oh,
Okay.
No, you still have the background.
I know.
Okay, Rebbe, here's one.
Right there.
It's
Yeah,
a little plastic
Hey.
thing with a roller underneath.
It's like
Oh.
this.
Uh-huh. So it's like sweeping up, mamish, like Beis Shammai says.
You roll it like this and it picks
Oh.
up the krishkis. You
Uh-huh.
turn it over, you open it up, and you empty it all out.
Uh-huh. I thought people only use that for like matzah crumbs, you know. I don't know, because the crazy amount of crumbs that come out.
You have a
abundance
separate
of-
one for matzah crumbs. I mean, yeah.
But
The
people use it
ones-
for regular Shabbos. Interesting.
the
So-
ones
so-
that,
So that is mamish. The imagine Beis Shammai would be dancing if he would see that. He'd be thrilled to see that people are using his mechabdin as habayis. You sweep the house before the Mayim Achreinim. So they mamish pass that around. That's so interesting. Uh-huh. The truth is, I've never seen anyone do it like that on the table. You know, I've seen.
Oh, the kids fight over it to use it.
Uh-huh.
Isaac, the one that Isaac has is a modern one. It's
Uh-huh.
a roller. But
Uh-huh.
the regular one is what Ezra is showing. That's the normal.
Uh-huh. 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 Okay. Anyway, very interesting. So this is Beis Shammai. This is the halacha that we follow. Mechabdin as habayis. The only thing is that that it's really meant for big pieces, and I don't know if that thing picks up the big pieces.
Not
But-
big chunks, no.
Right. Right.
It's a
It
roller.
pushes them along. It doesn't have to pick them up.
Uh-huh. It pushes them along.
Pushing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Good point. Right. Okay. So bottom line is that the custom nowadays, it would seem that you should be careful to remove the big pieces, and so they shouldn't get dirty from the Mayim Achreinim. And nevertheless, you should leave some bread on the table, at least in the corner or somewhere on the table, that it be until after Birchas HaMazon. Okay, so that's that. So the only issue that we're stuck with is the issue of the there's one issue that we're left with, and that is that ruining pieces that are smaller than the size of a kazayas, even though it's permissible, is it acceptable? Does it cause poverty or not? So on this, in the regular Shulchan Aruch, it mentions, even though it's permissible to ruin and to make, to la'abed, to destroy pieces that are smaller than a kazayas, nevertheless, it's kosher la'anios. It could cause poverty. So from that, it sounds like you want to sweep up even the small pieces because you don't want to get poverty. The only thing is the Mishnah Brura, the way he learns is that refers to only stepping on these pieces. That's a very big embarrassment. But when you throw them away into water, so even if they get ruined through water, there's not a problem because it's less than the size of a kazayas. So the way he wants to learn, at least according to one opinion in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings a second opinion that some are machmir when there are many, that it could add together to a size of an olive. But the point is that he's saying that he's not worried about the mayim achronim falling on these small pieces. Only thing that he's worried about is that it's not like you don't have to ever be concerned about smaller pieces than a kazayas. You really should not degrade them to the extent that you bizui gadol, he calls it, a very big embarrassment to them when you to lidrois alehem, to step on them. But if you throw them, if they get wet by the mayim achronim, that doesn't seem to be an issue because you're not like stepping directly on them. Something spilled on them, whatever. So that's the way he understands it, that it's not an issue. Now, Taisvis seems to think, it's a little unclear. Taisvis doesn't explain what he says, but he says very short that he implies, like, however, it is kasha la'anios, it could cause poverty, implying like even though you don't have to worry if the mayim achronim spills on it, but it's nevertheless not appropriate. Now the Alter Rebbe says in the same chapter in paragraph 5, he says even though you're allowed to ruin these small pieces, don't throw them in a place where people step because it's kasha la'anios. Don't throw them where people are stepping when they step on smaller pieces, and they only allow it to be done to destroy them if lashlicham lamayim, to throw them into water, ukiyotze bazeh, or anything similar. So it sounds like he's following, the Mishnah Berurah is following the same as the Alter Rebbe, that it's not an issue here as long as you're not throwing them in a place where people are walking, and that would be considered a bizui oichlin. And maybe that's how they're learning Taisvis, because Taisvis doesn't explain himself. He says miu kasha la niyusa. It's a pirurim that are less than the size of a kazais. You're allowed to destroy with your hand, but it's kasha la niyusa. It could cause poverty, and that's when you do it. That's when you maybe step on them, or it could cause that if you do it in a degrading way. It's b'makam drisas ragle b'nei adam, when you place it in a place where people are walking. Okay, so that seems to answer all of the questions that we were dealing with, and it also gives us an understanding of how we should be careful with the mayim achronim, not to allow any of the food to get dirtied. Yes, Ben.
I have a question. If you pick up those small pieces, the crumbs or the bread, and you throw it to the chickens, is that mashchit or not mashchit?
Oh, well, no, you're feeding. But on Shabbos, it could be an issue. Are they your chickens or they're outside?
Yeah,
You're not allowed
like
to feed.
on the farm, you
On
know,
the farm.
like if you throw it outside to the
You
chickens.
have to feed your animals. You have to feed your
Right.
animals food. It's a mitzvah. You have to feed them before you feed yourself.
Okay.
And there's halachas about animals.
That's
so,
lekinuach. Lekinuach, they get the crumbs.
That's the dessert. You mean you fed them already? This is just dessert.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to be careful also on Pesach that you don't feed them, or during the year you don't feed them milk and meat, because you're benefiting from milk and meat. Or on Pesach you could benefit from chametz if you're feeding them chametz. So you have to be careful when you have animals. There's certain halachas about animals. You have to feed them before you eat. You can't eat breakfast until you feed your animals.
Right.
Okay, so the next Gemara. The next Gemara says, Beis Shammai Yomer, Beis Shammai says, let me tell you where we're up to. We are let's see, about 15, maybe 17 lines from the bottom of the page, where the last word on the line, Beis Shin Aleph. Beis Shin Aleph stands for Beis Shammai Oimrim. And we're on 52b. 52b, the last word on the line, Beis Shin Aleph, and that stands for Beis Shammai Oimrim. Beis Shammai says, Ner Umazain, that the order of doing Havdalah is Ner, first you do the fire, Mazain, then you bench, because we're talking about a case where a person had 1 cup of wine and he's going to bench with the Havdalah in the same ceremony. So he's doing the fire, then the benching, and then the Besamim, and then the Havdalah. Then he does the spices after the benching, and then the Havdalah, then the A final bracha mavdil bein kodesh l'choil. And Beis Hillel says, no, you have to switch around the middle two. Beis Hillel says you start with fire, like Beis Shammai said, and you end with Havdalah, like Beis Shammai said, but the middle two are switched. You first do spices and then do the grace after meal. So the Gemara says, Rav Huna bar Yehuda ikla lebei Rava. Rav Huna bar Yehuda happened to come to the house of Rava, and it was a Motzei Shabbos. Chazio l'Rava d'barach abasamim bereisha. He saw that Rava did something very surprising. Rava made the bracha on besamim before he did the bracha on the fire. Now, in our Mishnah, both opinions, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both say you do fire before besamim. There's no question. Fire always comes before besamim, before the spices. That's according to our Mishnah. There was no other alternative option. And Rav Huna bar Yehuda, who knew our Mishnah, he goes to Rava's house. He says, "What are you doing? You do besamim. You're switching around the order. You did besamim spices first." So Amar Lei, so Rava told Rav Huna, no, I'm sorry. He asked him, Amar Lei, Rav Huna bar Yehuda asks Rava, Michdi, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Michdi, let's see. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Amar, like Ligi, they don't argue about the fire, that it comes first. How could you do spices first when the fire is supposed to come first? Titnan, because we learned in a Mishnah, Beis Shammai, Beis Shammai says, Neru mazin besamim b'havdalah, that the order is ner fire first, and Beis Hillel says ner besamim mazin b'havdalah, that you do fire first also. So now they switch around the second and third, but the first one, according to both, is fire. So how, Rava, did you do? How could you do the besamim, the spices first? So Ani Rava Basrei. So Rava answered him, and he said, Zu divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Reb Meir. What you're quoting for me is the way Reb Meir learned the Mishnah. That's Reb Meir. That's why Reb Meir is the author of the Mishnah. That's how Reb Meir learned this argument. So Reb Meir is the author of the Mishnah. Stam Mishnah is Reb Meir. Reb Meir authored this Mishnah, and he understood the argument Beis Shammai Beis Hillel in this way, that they both agree that fire comes first. Aval, but Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo nechlaku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel ala mazin shu b'tchila. That Beis Shammai Beis Hillel agree that the grace after meal for sure comes first. V'al havdalah shu b'sayf, and they all agree that the hamad b'kodesh l'chayil comes last. And as we understand, we know the reason for that, because you want to keep on the Shabbos as long as you can. So we want to stay with Shabbos. So we push Havdalah till the end because we want to keep Shabbos on us as long as we can. So Havdalah is for sure last. Alman nechlaku. So what are the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Al hamar v'al habasamim, on the fire and on the basamim. Which one comes first? Does the fire or the spices? Which one? Beis Shammai says al hamar v'yachikach basamim. Beis Shammai says first you say the bracha on the fire, then basamim, then the spices. And Beis Hillel says basamim v'yachikach mar, that you first recite the bracha on the basamim, on the spices, and afterwards you recite the bracha on the fire. And that's how we do it. We follow Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, go ha'am to Beis Hillel, I'll leave it Rabbi Yehuda. We follow Beis Hillel, but according to who? According to Reb Meir, or according to Rabbi Yehuda? We follow him according to the custom of the people is to follow Beis Hillel according to Rabbi Yehuda, who's not our Mishnah. Our Mishnah doesn't mention this opinion. This is brought in the Tosefta, and we know it because we learned this already before. Some of you probably find this. You're remembering this point that we had an argument earlier of Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda, what the specific order was, and our Mishnah said one way and explained the argument in one way, but Rabbi Yehuda in the Tosefta, he explains it a little differently, and the custom of the world is to follow Beis Hillel according to the Rebbe Yehuda way, and not according to the Reb Meir way. So even though the halacha follows Beis Hillel, you still have to know which Beis Hillel. Is it the Reb Meir's understanding of Beis Hillel, or is it Rebbe Yehuda's understanding of Beis Hillel? Now, what's the svara? What is the logic behind these arguments? But Ben has a question. Ben.
Yeah, I wonder if I found a mistake in the text here. It says Rabba Ra'a Rabba Shebirech al Besamim Betchila. But that was Rabbi Yehuda that saw Rabba, not Rabba saw Rabba.
Maybe.
That's in the on the side in the Perush. I'm reading it.
Yeah, the Steinsaltz might have made a
Yeah, the
little
Steinsaltz
mistake.
made a mistake. So it is a mistake. Okay, so
I don't know. I don't see it in front of me, but
yeah.
and
Well, I'm reading it to you. Rabba Ra'a et Rabba Shebirech al Besamim Betchila.
yeah. That sounds like a mistake. Yeah.
Okay, because I don't want to learn it the wrong way. So
Yeah.
thank you.
So so the question is, so what is the logic behind this? Why would it be better to recite the bracha on the fire first? And why would it be better to recite the bracha on the besamim, on the spices first? So Beis Shammai says you say the bracha on the fire first. The reason for that is that the fire is lit, you're benefiting from the light, so you should recite the bracha for the fire first, because the fire is lit already. Beis Hillel says that you should first do the besamim, because the besamim is more of an honor for Shabbos. It's covered for Shabbos that your soul has left. So it's coming to, it emphasizes that the soul left. So it's covered of Shabbos, and therefore there would be reason to, do besamim, to do the spices first, because it emphasizes the fact that your extra soul that you receive on Shabbos has left, and the spices is to calm you down, to comfort you for losing that extra soul.
So wouldn't you want to do that later?
No, you want the comfort as soon as you can, as soon as possible.
You don't want to deal with the fact that the soul has left so soon. So you're trying to drag it out, keep the Shabbat with you as long as you can.
So really what you're asking is, there seems to be a contradiction here, because we said earlier that you're doing the Havdalah last because you want to keep Shabbos with you as long as you can. And that implies like the soul doesn't leave until you do the final bracha of the Havdalah. Now, if you didn't do, if the soul didn't leave yet till you do the final bracha of the Havdalah, so you would think that you should do the besamim after you do the Havdalah, because that's when the soul left. That's when you need the comfort. So it seems that even though you're keeping Shabbos as much as you can, you're keeping Shabbos and you're pushing the Havdalah off, but it seems that the soul leaves right after Shabbos. That's what it seems like, because that's how else would you answer this question? Now, we learned earlier about the pushing off, that we had that contradiction of we had the contradiction about Havdalah you do in Beis Shammai, that why did he do Kiddush? He does the bracha of Kiddush first, then the wine. Havdalah, he did the bracha of the wine first, and then he did the Havdalah bracha. So it sounded like a contradiction. And so the Gemara answered over there that to answer that question, the Gemara said that Shani iyula yoima me'afuke yoima, and to bring in Shabbos, the more earlier you bring it in, the better, and therefore you should do the bracha of Kiddush according to Beis Shammai. You do it first, and then you do the bracha of the wine. But to leave for Havdalah, the later, the more you push it off, it shows delay lehave alon kamasoy, that it shows that it's not a burden on us, and that we're trying to get rid of Shabbos. So we want to push off. So it doesn't say the reason over there is because we want to keep the soul, right? It doesn't say. In other words, according to this question, it would seem like the Gemara there should answer, you know why we want to push off Shabbos You want to push off ending Shabbos. We want to push off ending of Shabbos because we're able to. We have the soul, this extra soul of Shabbos. People, who would want to get rid of that? And the Gemara uses the term, no, we want to push off ending the Shabbos. It shouldn't look like we have a burden on us. So what that sounds like, I mean, it's not a proof, but it sounds like the soul of Shabbos leaves right after Shabbos, but we keep on the holiness of Shabbos, or at least the laws of Shabbos, because we're not considering it a burden. We want to push it off as much as we can, and therefore we'll say the bracha bari pri hagafen first, at least according to Beis Shammai. I mean, everyone says the bracha bari pri hagafen first, but we do it by Kiddush also. But according to Beis Shammai, it's more visible that you push off the Shabbos by saying that bari pri hagafen. You push off ending Shabbos by saying bari pri hagafen first, and then you end the Shabbos later. So I'm thinking that might be a little hint to this source, which is interesting. So the question of the day is, when does the soul of Shabbos arrive, and when does the extra soul of Shabbos leave? Does it arrive when you accept Shabbos on yourself, and does it leave when you end the Shabbos with your Havdalah, or does it arrive when Shabbos comes in and it leaves when the actual night falls, when the night when dusk happens and the Shabbos soul leaves? So this would seemingly be a proof from our Gemara of the fact that. That you say the fact that the fact that the bracha of the besamim goes before the bracha of the mavdil, and would seemingly prove, if the besamim is before hamavdil, it seems like you need the comfort before you say the hamavdil, because the soul probably left already. The only contradiction to this